Hello everyone, my name is Debbie Schramer and I would like to read you a book that I wrote today. It is called The Storyteller, and my husband and I made all of the little fairy furniture and characters and all of the nature art that's featured in the book and the photography. So anyway, I hope you'll enjoy it, and it's called The Storyteller. The Storyteller, a journey to the enchanted forest. Deep in the beautiful forest, there lives a wonderful little man whose life is filled with stories. He reads from his book of tales every day, sitting in his tiny throne. Travel with us as we listen to the storyteller share his memory of a surprising magical journey. Once upon a time, in a lovely dense forest far away, there lived a curious group of people, little people who were quite amazing. They were so small that you could only see them if you were really careful, and even then you might miss their small world if you looked away for just a moment. They lived in a wondrous house made from the forest, hidden deep within the beautiful trees and ferns. Their home was magical. It held the voices of the leaves and flowers and the spirits of the wonderful little animals and birds who lived all around them. There was Stefan, a little man whose hat was made from a pod. He carried a tiny pouch filled with plants for healing. His friend Mossman was the wisest of the forest. He knew everything about the woods and the animals. Barkman was quiet and rarely spoke, but was their protector and was very kind. There was the magical horse Galliant and his friend the flying dog Smither. Princesses lived in the forest house too, and Randolph the Russian dancer, and even a man with seaweed hair and metal eyes named Arno. The beautiful house the little people lived in was the most magical house one would ever see. They made it from gnarled branches of the old trees and delicate moss from the forest floor. There were even odd pieces of driftwood and small shells Randolph had found near the sea. Mossman had collected herbs and small stones from the pond. The princesses had gathered beautiful flowers and leaves from the garden. All these beautiful treasures could be discovered in the enchanted house. Far across the sea, many miles from the enchanted forest, there lived a little girl named Anna. She lived with her brother Thomason and her mother and father Sarah and Andre, who were very artistic. Thomason was a dreamer. He always seemed to be lost in the clouds. They lived in a wonderful old house by the ocean, filled with the odd treasures they had discovered by the sea. They would often walk together early in the morning, searching for unusual things that had washed up on the shore. An old metal box, rusted and curious, lost feathers, and even beautiful shards of glass and china. Anna and her mother loved growing flowers. They spent many hours out in the garden. Anna had even grown a sunflower house, her favorite part of the garden. Andre was an actor and a painter. Sarah loved birds and made beautiful little furniture for the fairies. Their friends Ian and Neva often visited them, traveling many miles from their farm in the mountains. One night, when Anna was sleeping, she had the strangest dream. Her dolls were talking to her. They told her of a beautiful house in the forest and of tiny people who were very curious. The next morning, Anna hurried to tell her family about her unusual dream, but they were astonished, for they all had dreams too. Two princesses told Sarah to travel to a faraway land to find the giant sunflowers. Andre heard voices of two curious creatures who came from the sea. One man held a wheel and a shoe. Find the enchanted forest, travel any way you can. Thomason saw two boys in his dream riding across the rolling hills. The little family sat quietly, pondering this mysterious event. Suddenly, Anna's mother said, "We must follow these dreams to see what they mean." They all smiled, and without another word, they began to prepare for their amazing journey. Suddenly, Sarah remembered they needed someone to watch over the house and the animals while they were gone. She ran to the neighbors, Mia and Sasha, to ask for help. "Of course," they exclaimed, quite puzzled. "We'll water the flowers, too." The two sisters looked at each other curiously. "I wonder where they're going?" Sasha asked. Sarah had already run out of sight, hurrying to jump into the car before a moment more passed by. The little family was off, not sure where their adventure would take them. Anna looked back at the house as their little car rumbled down the road. Little did she know what amazing things they would discover next. The little family drove on and on and on through beautiful fields of bright flowers, over huge snow-covered mountains, towards magical sunsets and lakes. Finally, they reached a quiet river, following it for many days. Then they reached the sea. Suddenly, Andre stopped the tired little blue car. "Look, there's a whale!" Thomason quickly jumped out, running to the edge of the shore. He had seen a little boat near the whale, but couldn't believe his eyes, for there, holding two wooden oars, rowing along, was a rabbit as plain as anything, looking back at him. The little family slowly walked closer to the edge of the waves. Soon the curious rabbit was right there before them, smiling as if he were a long-lost friend. There is something familiar about him, Anna thought. Just then a huge whale leaped out of the sea water and crashed down into the waves in front of them. They all laughed in astonishment. The rabbit began to speak. His language was eloquent and soft, like a wise man. The family listened, captivated by his every word. "I was in my boat and suddenly saw a bottle in the sea. I rowed and rowed until I was able to gather it up, and inside I found a mysterious note. It looked as though it had been written long ago. It said to find a family who would be journeying from afar, to tell them to look for a princess by a beautiful castle. She would be carrying a bird." She would have a message for them, and in the bottle was this picture. He handed Anna a beautiful picture of a rabbit and a lion. It looked as if they were floating in a garden. Anna thanked the rabbit for his help. The little family traveled on when they came to an amazing castle. There they did indeed meet a princess, and she invited them for tea. She told them about the garden and the pond where they would find ducks and butterflies. But then, as they walked into the garden, to their surprise, all along the path they found tiny little furniture too, small enough for fairies and elves. What an astonishing place! "Perhaps we are getting nearer to the enchanted forest," Sarah exclaimed excitedly. Not so many miles away, the little people in the enchanted forest were buzzing with excitement as they began to hear the family was getting closer. Friends all along the way had sent messages about their long journey. After all these years, the special family would finally be arriving. The prince's room was especially busy. All their beautiful gowns of rose petals and jasmine, sea glass crowns, and petunia slippers were being brought from the trunks to be dusted off and readied. Princess Cecilia even gave the little rabbit prince a kiss for telling Miss Cat about the wondrous event. The poet Paulina was writing every detail in her book. The lamppost by the end of the path was ready to light, and the clock was ticking. If only Anna and her family could feel their excitement. That night, Sarah had another dream. She saw a throne made of beautiful fabric and tiny silver beads. A little girl sat sadly in the corner of the throne. Sarah wondered why the little girl seemed so sad. All of a sudden, someone gave Sarah a beautiful bouquet of flowers. Then she heard a voice. It was very soft. She has been waiting such a long time for you, and now you are finally on your way. How happy she will be at last. Then Sarah saw a woman standing before her. Her dream lost its color. Everything turned black and white. The woman seemed sad too, but kind. She will finally be able to smile, she said to Sarah. Then Sarah awoke. The next morning, Sarah told Andre about her dream. He was very puzzled by it and thought quietly for a moment. I'm sure we'll find the answer soon, dear. The further away they drove from their little home, the more mysterious their journey became, but they knew they were on the right path. Sarah and Andre woke the children and off they drove again. After driving for many hours, they stopped to rest by a meadow. They were growing quite weary of their travels. But when they awoke, there stood before them the tiniest man they had ever seen. Don't be alarmed, my dear friends. I am Barkman. I am here to explain why you have traveled so far. I know all about you. Sarah and Andre were quite astonished, but being little children, Anna and Thomason were unafraid. They all listened as the little man began to speak. Many years ago, more than I can remember, a man and his wife came to visit our forest. They had a little baby, a beautiful little girl. The mother and father loved the child very much. They would dance with her in the meadow, this very meadow, holding her up in their arms, twirling in the sunlight. One day, as the child lay sleeping in a cradle, they were dancing on a giant sunflower when suddenly a huge wind swept through the meadow and took them away. They were never seen again. The little family listened, their hearts full of sorrow. The king and the queen of the forest found the child and cared for her for many years in their castle. Then one day, Delphine, for that is what she was called, was walking in the forest when she came upon a garden of giant sunflowers. They seemed strangely familiar to her. Suddenly, she heard voices calling her name. She looked, and there on the sunflowers stood two little women. They were princesses. Delphine, we are here to help you find your family. We know you are sad. We have always been here watching over you, said one of them. Yes, I have dreamt of you, Delphine exclaimed. Is that where you live? She pointed to a tiny house with stairs leading up to the door. Yes, we will show you. Delphine could scarcely believe her eyes. She followed the little people through the door, amazed at how suddenly everything changed. There before them was the most beautiful giant garden she had ever seen, with tiny twinkling crystals and little fireflies floating about, birds singing, and the scent of flowers everywhere. Then in a clearing beyond them stood the most magnificent sight Delphine had ever seen. They were houses like something from a fairy tale, beautiful, enchanted houses. Suddenly a man spoke. "Hello, Delphine. Here are a pair of shoes I made for you." It was a little man standing by the tower with a paintbrush in his hand. Anna asked, "What happened to Delphine, Barkman?" He continued on. "She met the other little people in the enchanted forest, and they became wonderful friends. The princesses taught her to make tiny furniture with them from flowers and twigs. She even helped the little people make their magical house. She lived with the king and queen of the forest. She should have been very happy, but her heart was still sad. She longed for a family." Thomason, who was usually lost in his thoughts, suddenly spoke up. "We are her new family, Barkman, aren't we? That is why we've traveled so far." "Yes," Barkman smiled. "We always knew it was you, but we had to wait until you understood. That is why we sent you so many dreams and messages." Anna and her family were so excited and happy they couldn't wait to meet Delphine. They climbed into their little blue car once again as Barkman directed them through the narrow forest road. Finally they arrived at a beautiful grove of old trees, the leaves fluttering in the wind. "Follow me, my dear friends," Barkman said softly. "You will finally be able to meet Delphine." They walked through the lovely trees, feeling the gentle, quiet presence of the forest. Then the grove became an amazing meadow of flowers, and there in the middle of this magical garden was the enchanted house. All the little people ran out to meet the family, followed by Delphine, her arms outstretched to greet everyone. It was the happiest day of her life. A real family for Delphine at last. And that's the end. So I hope you liked my story, our story, and I will be writing a sequel, part 2 to the story, to tell more about what happened with Delphine and her new family and the enchanted house and all the little people. So I hope you'll keep visiting our YouTube channel, Nature Artists, and visit our other videos. And I hope you enjoyed this and are having a really wonderful day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.